Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AU L2-3.3.5, Correlate Audit Record Review Analysis and Reporting Processes for Investigation and Response to indications of unlawful, unauthorized, suspicious, or unusual activities. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. Heidi ho, good neighbor. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
So, Mike, in an effort to try to simplify this control, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to try to simplify it for our audience, this control is about organizing the audit log process in the event of an investigation of suspicious activity. Did I get that correct?
I think that's fairly close. Maybe I should
Okay.
sit on the other side of the desk today.
Okay, we'll elaborate here in a second. I just wanted to try and possibly fail to simplify this for our audience, but it sounds like I did okay. So with that being said, uh, let's just jump right in. Why is this control important?
This is a really interesting control because I feel like it's interesting that they have this control stand on its own. There's a series of controls in the 3.3 family, right? The audit and accountability family. And what they're really getting at is, do you have a security information and event management system, something that essentially takes information, log files, generally speaking, off of devices. And then, in this 3.3.5 control, it's correlate audit record review. So in other words, are you creating a connection between the records that are coming in, the logs? Are you correlating the audit record review process, analysis, and reporting process? So in other words, are you reviewing what's coming in for investigation and response to indications of, so are you looking at these reports for the purpose of investigation and response? So are you looking at them to decide if there's any action that needs to be taken on indications of unlawful, unauthorized, suspicious, or unusual activity? Those are like the four indicators that something may be off, or a strange person may be doing things in your system, or there's something malicious going on. So, in looking at what this control really is, it's a control that dictates the minimum requirements of a security information and event management system. Sometimes a solution, sometimes it's a multiple solutions put together. But it's basically saying, look, we want to make sure your system actually performs what a real SIEM system should be performing. That is, that it does actually allow you to review records in a concise way and construe the results into an understanding of if there is indications of unlawful, unauthorized, suspicious, or unusual activity, i.e., are you getting relevant alerts and are you taking action on those alerts? Or can you take action based off those alerts? So that's what it means. I agree. It's really tough to simplify this one. But yet it's actually a really, really simple answer. 99% of SIEM solutions have all of this built in. It's like a formality. And my theory really is that they put this control in here because they really want to make sure that in case there are alternative SIEM systems put out onto the market that maybe don't do all of these things, maybe they just do the logging and retention process, but the incident response portion is not there. Very possible, especially like, Sentinel's not going to dictate the incident response or mandate what you have to look at. They're kind of telling you the things that you need to be looking at. So in that regard, it's just really getting into the weeds of what and how this system needs to perform.
Hard to simplify. It was hard to read. So,
I know a lot of big words in there. This is
yeah.
it's interesting. It's kind of a true story, right? So when I'm writing scripts for our other YouTube videos, I will often run them through like a chat GPT, and I will say, hey, chat GPT, can you bring this down to a third grade reading level? Right? Which, by the way, never works in compliance. This is like the
Mm-mm.
worst industry for trying to make anything simple. It just doesn't exist. Uh, this this control is definitely not written at a third grade reading level for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So going off of that, what are the key assessment points that an assessor would look for on this one?
Yeah. So on this one, it's pretty straightforward. There's only two assessment points. Number one is determine if audit record review, analysis, and reporting processes for investigation and response to indications of unlawful, unauthorized, suspicious, or unusual activity are defined. So, in other words, um, do you have what is going to be reported on defined? Do you have it set so that there is an alert if there is an anomalous login at 2 in the morning, with an understanding that if that were to happen, that would probably be the result of a malicious event? And is it defined somewhere? Well, where are you going to define it? You're going to define it in your SIEM solution, right? In your settings, and then also in your incident response plan, right? That's where you're going to define that. But I don't know, gosh, I don't know how you go find these answers without the internet or without talking to some people in the government who are directly responsible for auditing this stuff, which is I think what we did. But that it's that answer and that assessment pointer, you really you got to leap a little bit. You got to leap a little bit. But that being said, that's how we answer that. We say, look, it's implemented in the SIEM solution and incident response plan. Those are the two components that are in effect here. Second assessment point, determine if defined audit record review analysis and reporting processes are correlated. We again say it's implemented via the SIEM solution and incident response plan. Again, where is it defined? Audit record review, that all happens inside the SIEM solution. The analysis happens in the SIEM solution and a little bit in the incident response plan. And then reporting processes, again, your SIEM solution should be doing all the reporting. And then as an incident response, if it hits a certain threshold and it alerts, then you should be reviewing that in your incident response plan. So those are the systems that are involved in being able to make sure you're doing it right.
Absolutely. And what are the potential difficulties of enacting this one for your organization, if
Yeah,
any?
so I think this one goes back again to budget, right? So it goes to budget and it goes to implementation. So number one problem people have is actually just getting their company to pass budget for having a security information and event management system. If you were not in defense, you basically more or less really wouldn't need this unless you were a very large network. I would basically say more or less this is kind of almost unusual in a typical commercial network of under 500 employees or 500 machines. However, what's interesting is all large companies have this, and they have for years. So when you start getting into enterprise security, the reality starts to set in that you can't have eyes on everything. You just can't do it. You can't have eyes on everything. You've got a situation where the system is just too large to keep an eye on everything going on. And so you need a systematic way for ingesting log files from everything to be able to spot that strange behavior, that bad behavior, or permission escalations. So it's not unusual for larger companies to have this. It's very unusual for small companies to have it and kind of filters up through there. So budget is one thing. Another thing is ease of implementation. These are not easy to implement. A lot of times they're running agents on the machines or special hardware. It's just a higher level cybersecurity solution. And so as a result, there isn't really an easy way to implement these. Um, then when you implement them, a lot of people would leave them running stock. They leave them running in default settings, which means they're not really alerting on the things that are relevant to your system in a lot of cases. And that can create a really big security nightmare because now you think you're monitoring your system, but then you're not being alerted when there's an issue. So the next challenge is making sure that setup is complete. It's not just enough to plop an agent on a machine and say it's monitored. You've actually got to really configure that software and make sure it's feeding into a ticketing system or feeding into somewhere where people are checking on the alerts. So I think that one's a real challenge. Um, I think the third piece is just, the ongoing challenge of storage. Log files accumulate. It can be a lot of storage. Where are you going to put that storage? That can really be a more of a technical issue, but it is a thing, and we see it often. The system can actually break if it fills up hard drive space. So that's definitely something to be aware of.
Absolutely. And what we do here at this podcast is we ask three poignant questions and then a silly question, which then Mike tries to make relevant. And I have to say, this one could have been better. You might have to work to make this one relevant. If a raccoon, we're starting strong, sneaks into a server room, does that count as suspicious activity under audit logs or just a midnight snack search?
I think it's both. I mean, yeah, well, first off, the question is how the raccoon get in the room, right? So then we got a security breach for sure, and we're definitely reporting on that incident. But the worst part is raccoons love wiring. They're kind of like rats, it's like your car. If you leave your car out in the field and a raccoon gets up under the hood, say goodbye to that electrical, it's gone. So yeah, I don't know, but raccoons are hungry and they certainly have a right to, it's like an attacker, right? An attacker has the right to go look through your network if you left the door open. So don't leave the door open for raccoons. Make sure you've got monitoring in place for those raccoons, and you should be fine.
Look at that. He did it. He made it relevant. He manages to pull it off every time. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us and talking about this control that had a longer description than podcast episode. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman. Love doing it.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. And just a reminder from last week's episode, the channels that you were looking for are On-Call Compliance Solutions, but not Mission Compliance Podcast. Mission Compliance Podcast is a subsidiary of On-Call Compliance Solutions. If they haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they should like, comment, and subscribe for sure. Listenership just goes up and up every week. And guys, with CMMC coming up very soon, there's no better place to get information on what on earth these controls are and what the latest happenings are with all this DFARS, NIST, and CMMC stuff.
You heard Mike. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform so you know when new episodes like this one are released. And we truly appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.